This is the next Enterprise. It's the NCC 1701F from Star Trek Online, which is officially licensed CBS Paramount IP, so until we see something else in a Star Trek movie, TV show, cartoon, whatever, this is the next Enterprise. Before I go on, I'd like to thank the channel Zeph Films for graciously allowing me to use his clips of the Enterprise F in this video. There's plenty to feast your eyes on there, so go and check them out. The link is in the description. Here in this video, we'll break down everything, run through its backstory, its origins from a design contest, its place in the timeline, a bunch of visual comparisons, how there's more than just shuttlecrafts on this thing, and really just a bunch of other stuff. So we'll get into all of that if that's what you choose to do with the next few minutes of your life. No one's judging. If you like what you see here, please consider subscribing, tapping that bell, and all that other stuff you hear in practically every other YouTube video. Those sort of things really help out small channels like this. I only put out about one video a month, so I'm not going to spam your inbox. Alright, now let's get to it. This is the next Enterprise. So real briefly, here's some basic information about the ship before we dive in. The Enterprise F is an Odyssey class, which may be a nod to the ancient Greek poem, or the USS Odyssey the Dominion took out, or 2001 A Space Odyssey, or a 2001 Honda Odyssey. Here it is next to the Enterprise D and E. It's definitely much larger from the side profile, but that's not necessarily the case. We'll get into that later when we do a more in-depth visual breakdown. The main visual feature here that jumps out are the two necks. While the ship is inspired by previous Enterprises, the dual neck design is unique here. But anyway, let's touch upon its backstory. So when does the ship exist? It launched in the year 2409, and let's give that some context. Nemesis went down in 2379. The supernova that destroyed Romulus went down about 8 years later in 2387. Star Trek Picard picks up 12 years after that in 2399. And jump ahead a full decade to 2409, which is when we'll see the Enterprise F cruising around. By this point, the Romulan Empire territory was up for grabs. The Klingons were like, "Long live the Empire!" And things soured with the Federation. Other threats showed up and conveniently laid down the basis for a multi-faction MMO. In any case, that's the universe where the Enterprise F exists. Now let's get into its real-world origins. The Enterprise F is a product of a design contest. Fans were encouraged to submit proposals for what would become the next Enterprise. It was conducted by Cryptic Games, who developed Star Trek Online. A few years earlier, a similar contest was held to design Captain Riker's first command, the USS Titan, mainly because Nemesis flopped and they never got around to designing the actual Titan. So the Design the Next Enterprise contest was held in early 2011. The winning designer would win a lifetime subscription to the game, which is still going strong in 2020, only it's free to play now, so I guess everyone has a lifetime subscription now.
And the winner is?
There won't be any more winners.
Here are some of the other entries. This design slots the saucer directly into the secondary hull. Even though this entry was dismissed, Cryptic still liked it enough to put it in the game as the Chimera class. And Nog ends up being the captain of one of these.
You mean if I had to take command, I would be called captain too?
This one came from artist Chris Madden. I'm gonna leave it on the screen as I talk about other contest entries because it's the only right thing to do. And no offense to these other entries, but seriously. These three finalists all have something in common. They furthered the fusing of the saucer and the secondary hull to the point where the hulls are just continuous slabs, very much a visual continuation of the Enterprise E. Speaking of the Enterprise E, well, where is it? The last time we see it is in the Star Trek Countdown comic series. That sets up the backstory for the 2009 movie, so right before the destruction of Romulus. By this point, Data is resurrected in the body of B4, which is pretty rude, and he's the captain of the ship. Though there's not much to say about it. The artwork is pretty lazy. It looks like the same drawing of the ship is reused multiple times. There are maybe 2 or 3 actual drawings of the ship which are reused over several panels. So getting back to the winning design, here it is. This is from artist Adam Isle. You can find a link to his site in the description if you'd like to check out some of his other work. Immediately his design jumps out for an obvious reason. It's got this black box around the ship. What is that? Is it some kind of protective shell? Or maybe it's this new kind of subspace bubble? Oh yeah, and then there's the neck, or necks. This is Star Trek The Next Generation.
That is a joke. I get it. It is not funny.
At this point, the Cryptic art team took over and used Isle's concept design to continue developing what would eventually become the Enterprise F. A 3D model was composed to see what Isle's design could look like in 3 dimensions. The task of hammering out the composition and proportion would be the biggest challenge. At this point, it appears that Cryptic was simply trying to recreate Isle's design as accurately as possible. On each side, the neck flows up out of the sides of the secondary hull and tapers into the rim of the saucer. And around the secondary hull, the top and bottom halves meet with this thin gap running around the side. This is reminiscent of the same visual design on the Enterprise D. There was a lot of room for interpretation from Isle's concept. You can see here how the Cryptic team made multiple versions of the neck, and this was only the beginning of advancing the design to what would eventually appear on screen. As the development process continued, this model was created. By this point, the neck blended more vertically upwards into the rear base of the saucer, more like a traditional Enterprise, as opposed to the initial Oberth style of saucer. Most of the elements you see here will be further refined in the final design. And here's where the ship stood near the end of the design process. The neck and lines of the hull flow seamlessly into each other. Whereas Isle's concept treated the saucer and the secondary hull like 2 separate pieces, this design presents the ship as if it were sculpted from one piece. For the most part, this is mostly the final design. So how did it turn out? Well, let's fire up Star Trek Online and find out. Okay, let's give this a go. Don't know what to do here. Try Steam. Okay, so I'm not trying that. Okay, how about this? Okay, let's get this installed. Yeah. Okay, that'll do. Alright, here we go. I'm going to open this door very slowly. Oh, hey, a Sovereign class. Okay, equip a kit. How do I equip a kit? How do I equip a kit? Okay, I don't even see it in my inventory. I better get a trophy for this. I give up. Okay, screw it. This is not working out. Once again, these are some clips from Zeph Films. Here it is in all its glory. You can definitely see the Enterprise lineage. The overall silhouette is very similar to the Enterprise E, while much of its hull shape is inspired by the Enterprise D. You can actually see elements of both ships throughout the Enterprise F. Around the rim of the saucer, there's the same sensor array strip you'll find on the Enterprise D. The Enterprise E didn't have this. The saucer itself is nearly a Control-C, Control-V of the Enterprise E. They both share that same elongated overall shape, with the same raised arrowhead area traveling backwards from the bridge dome. Along that, the impulse exhausts and the main shuttle bay share the same placement, though the main shuttle bay door is still the same garage door style from the Enterprise D. When we step back and look at the entire saucer, we find a familiar hourglass shape to what we saw or will see, whatever. It's got the same hourglass shape as the Enterprise J. While we're still on the saucer, it separates as well, though Enterprises have been doing this for over a century. However, moving farther back, the pylons have practically the same profile and swept-back design as the Enterprise E. In another interesting touch, the pylons also have an additional pair of impulse exhausts. On the lower half of the secondary hull, you can also see a bank of large windows, much like those found on the original refit Enterprise. When it comes to its size, the side profile makes the F look much larger than the previous 2 Enterprises. The D is clearly the shortest of the 3. However, when you take a look at all 3 Enterprises from a different angle, you'll see that you've wasted the last couple minutes of your life. You'll also see that the F is very close in size to the D. Once you eliminate the nacelles, the actual hull mass paints a very different picture. The E is absolutely dwarfed, and it appears that the F is just slightly larger than the D. Though looking at them from other angles, you'll find that the D's saucer is both wider and taller, which means you can literally fit the F saucer into the Enterprise D. And speaking of fitting things into each other, when we go all the way back to the rear, the Enterprise F features something that we haven't seen on any other Federation ship.
Take us in.
There's an auxiliary vessel named the USS Aquarius. It's about half the length of the Defiant. Its name also is designated with a USS, which means that it's a ship on its own and not considered just a shuttlecraft. Those usually just have a plain name like Galileo or Elbaz or Galileo 2. You can see the Cryptic art team toying with this idea back during the design phase. Other considerations for this area of the ship included a shuttle bay and additional impulse exhausts. And stepping back and looking at the whole ship, it's impossible to ignore the black and white design all over its hull. This motif is on the saucer, the nacelles, the secondary hull. It's all over this thing, which makes the ship look like a cop car, or a skunk, or an orca, or a pair of Jordans, or Spy vs. Spy, or James Bond, or Barcode, or that time the Riddler was on TOS, or Panda Express, or the Scarface poster, or a penguin, or an Oreo, or a double stuff Oreo, or Young Frankenstein, or a Stormtrooper, or Piano Keys, or Snoopy, or a crossword puzzle, or a pirate flag, or a White Sox jersey, referee, or a soccer ball, or anything a dog sees. When we get to the bridge, we see a familiar layout. There's the command chairs in the center. The chairs themselves have a similar orientation to the Enterprise D, and the seats themselves are also very similar to the previous two Enterprises. No armrests though, which is pretty inconsiderate of the Cryptic Art team. Behind them is a crescent-shaped piece, like the wooden arch from the Enterprise D. Behind that is a full-size transporter pad integrated directly into the bridge. So, no more unnecessary trips to and from the transporter room, which is pretty considerate of the Cryptic Art team. Up front, there aren't any forward consoles like we typically see on a Starfleet ship, and the view screen is an isolated panel right in the middle of the room. Up top, there's a skylight window, there are more windows down the sides, and even a window in front of the view screen, so it fits the vibe of both the Kelvin and the Prime timelines. There's also a lower level of stations in the very front, and you can see here that LCARS is still a thing on this holographic console. I wonder if it's filled with holographic rocks. Elsewhere in the interior, things are pretty generic. Corridors are cavernous in this game. Running around in them, you feel as if you're shrunk down and everything else is normal. Somewhere along the line, the Enterprise took a serious beatdown and required a substantial refit. Following that, the ship was categorized as being a Yorktown class, or a Yorktown variant of the Odyssey class. I really don't know. Remember, I couldn't even finish the tutorial. It features numerous slight tweaks to the overall hull. I'll mention briefly that there are a ton of variants and customizations that you can make to the Odyssey class in the game. And not just to the hull skin. You can straight up change the nacelles, the saucer, the secondary hull. If you want to get into all the fine detail, again, go check out Zeph Films' channel. He takes his time going through each of them. As for the broad updates to the standard Odyssey class, the nacelles now have these fins in the rear. The pylons also wrap into the hull more like the Enterprise D, and are oriented more upright. On the bottom of the saucer, you'll also find this blue element. This is a nod to the USS Dauntless, which wasn't actually a Federation ship. I did a video on it, but they gave the Odyssey quantum slipstream drive just like the Dauntless had, so this isn't just the next Enterprise, this is the next Enterprise. Until we see something different in an official Star Trek production, this is the new official Enterprise. And this is the actual new Enterprise. So that's the video, and this is actually my 100th video, so I figure now's as good a time as any to say thank you, face to face or face to screen. It's been a lot of fun making these over the years, so I'm very appreciative and humbled by the fact that there are people like you out there to enjoy them. These names here on the screen right now are the rocks exploding out of consoles. Thank you for your generosity. I hope there's a lot more videos to come, and I will catch you in the next one.